character.
Hello Minecrafters everywhere, my name is Cubic and welcome back to episode 3 of our Simply Command Blocks series. Last episode, guys, we talked a lot about the set block command, the clear command, and we talked a little bit about the give command again. But today, guys, I want to start working on a map, so that way you guys can start to see some things in practicality and so forth. So what the first thing I want to do is set the weather settings, the mob settings, and so forth in the world. So as you guys see, it's night and there's a lot of mobs here, and it's kind of a little bit scary if you're going to do a survival map. You don't want mobs spawning everywhere. So we can do a couple things. We can set this just to peaceful. But if your game involves mobs, you're gonna want it not to be peaceful, because if we try to summon a creeper or whatever, let's actually just do command blocks, or not command blocks, let's just do a spawn egg. You guys can see we actually can't spawn a creeper. Nothing's happening. So what we like to do is have this on a difficulty where we can spawn mobs, but not have mobs spawn all over our world. So what we can actually do in the chat is T, and then we type in game rule. And if you hit tab, it'll show you a bunch of game rules. You can have command block output, a lot of different things here that can happen, but we want to look at do mob spawning right here. So if we type in do mob spawning, then hit tab, and then we can see do mob spawning, and if we want to set it to true, the world will spawn mobs naturally. We want to set it to false. So if we set it to false and then set this to difficulty hard, you guys can see no mobs are spawning. So that's something to note in your world if you want to do that. There's also several other game rules that we can go over here. Command block output basically means whenever we push this button, you guys will see in chat it says given birch wood to CubicPlays. We can actually toggle that off using the let's see, do command block. Let's see, that's not it. Command block output. If we set that to false, you guys can see that we're not actually getting any. We're not seeing any in the chat. So that's something to note. I want to set those to true though, just for the tutorial purposes. So now let's talk about the next one, which would be disable elytra movement check. That's something a little bit more advanced that we'll talk about, I guess, a little bit later. Something that's it's not used very often, to be honest. But if we wanted to use something new, let's say if we want to talk about the do daylight cycle. So do daylight cycle is basically Minecraft has a timer of just how long days and nights are. If we wanted to disable that and only have our world to be night or only have our world to be day, we could just do something like this. We set it to false. You guys can see that the world, if you look closely, the stars aren't rotating or anything like that. If we do time set and we set it to day, oops, set it to day, you guys see the sun rises, but you guys will notice the sun isn't actually moving. Nothing's happening. It's just staying still, which is something that I would probably use in this world just for the recording purposes. But if we were to disable this and set it to true, actually, you guys see the sun starts to slowly move, which is kind of nice. But we're going to set this to, let's go to false, because I want it to be day infinitely. So another game rule that we can talk about is, let's go to tabbing through do entity drops. So we're going to talk a little bit about the do entity drops, guys. So do entity, it's a little bit different. It's not what you think it is. So we have this set to false. Basically, entities are non-living entities this affects. So if we were to put down like a painting, for example, grab ourselves a painting. Okay, maybe put a few up here. Okay, and then we set our game mode to 0. You can see when we break these, we're not actually getting any drops off of this. This is how the do entities work, do entity drops. So even though we've placed down painting in survival mode, we don't actually get it back. Normally we should. So that's something to note for do entity drops. Now, for instance, if we spawn a creeper, we will still get get mob drops. So that's something to note. It doesn't actually kill like I said, any non-living entities this affects. So let's let's actually set that back to true. So if let's talk about the next one, which is do fire tick. Now if we set this to false, and we put down some spruce wood, like so, and then we get some flint and steel. Now, this should naturally start spreading. As you guys can see, it's not. So if I set this to true, do fire tick, eventually these guys are going to start burning. And you guys can see that we just lost one right there. Actually put that out so see if this thing will actually spread. But do fire tick is basically, it won't destroy blocks if you're using fire. Fire might go out, but it won't destroy any blocks. So that's something to note. Let's put some leaves down maybe to help this speed up a little bit. Alright, so you guys can see this is slowly starting to spread and actually kill blocks here. We've got going a little bit crazy right now, but we can also set this to false and it will stop spreading. So that's something kind of nice if you're maybe doing some special effects but you don't want to burn down your house. That would be kind of nice to do, but we're going to set this to, true. And let's talk about the next game rule. So the next game rule is what I was talking about earlier with entity drops. This is do mob loot. This basically works like everybody would hope it works, which is that mobs no longer drop any like gunpowder, for example. So if we kill this creeper, whoops. And you guys can see we're not getting any drops from it, which is pretty nice. I worked on a map recently that I needed this game rule. But if we set this to true again, you guys see we're now getting gunpowder. So something nice if you're going to go with any type of a game where you don't really want like gunpowder dropping or whatever, it's kind of nice to have that. Alright guys, so we talked about the do mob spawning. Do tile drops, that's something that's not used a whole lot, so I really won't talk about it a whole lot. It's, how do I want to describe it? Do tile drops kind of works like, for instance, let's go to true here. Actually, let's go to false so I can explain it a little bit better. So if we were put down like some oak wood here, let's grab ourselves an axe. Go into game mode 0. You guys can see that we're not actually getting any drops from this, just harvesting. That's kind of how the do tile drops works. Something that I really don't use a whole lot because I build a lot of mini games and so forth, so it really doesn't involve breaking a lot of blocks, but you can have that if you want. So the next one we are going to talk about, tile drops, keep inventory. Keep inventory is basically whenever you die, you keep the items in your inventory. Now, naturally, the game is set that you lose the items. The items fall out of your inventory. But if we set this to true, even in creative, if we just type in /kill, we still have our items in our inventory. If we were to set this to false, do /kill, you see our items just go flying all over the ground. So that's something nice, especially if you're doing, I use that in a lot of mini games, I can say it for a fact. So it's kind of nice to have that around just in case you're building any sort of a PvP game. Anything like that can be applied with the keep inventory. So for this game rule, guys, it's the log admin commands. Now, this is mainly for servers, to be honest. It's kind of like whenever a server kind of keeps track of all the commands run and so forth. It's a little bit weird, but you kind of want to set this to false most of the time, so that way it doesn't fill up that log for all the different commands and death. It's mainly death messages that it logs. So yeah, that's something just to kind of keep in mind if you're running a server. It doesn't really apply a whole lot to any sort of maps or anything like that. It's just mainly for server stuff. Okay, so the next one is mob griefing, guys. This one is one that I use a lot as well. Any mobs or any sort of explosions that do damage to the world, you can turn this on or off. So if we say false, and we say let's say I spawn in a creeper, set my game mode to 0. This creeper should come after me. And you guys can see that there is no damage to the world. That's something nice to have, but if we were to set this to true, spawn in a creeper, and you guys can see it's done damage to our world. So that's something to note as well. We're going to set this to false for the game that we're actually going to be building, but it's something nice to have, especially if you are building any sort of a game that involves hitting mobs or whatever you might be doing. It's just something there for you, which I really, really like. Alright guys, so the next one we're going to be talking about is natural regeneration. This is one that a lot of UHCs use. In fact, it was added because of UHC, and it's basically regen of hearts. So if we set this to false, set our game mode to, let's actually grab some food here. Type in food, yeah, that's what's going to show up. Let's grab, like, I don't know, let's grab a couple pork chops, for example. So if we've already taken damage here earlier, you guys can see even if we eat, we're not actually regenning. So that's how UHC kind of works, and if you guys have ever wondered, if we set this to true, we should start regenerating hearts here pretty quickly. So that's something nice to know if you're trying to build like a UHC map, for example. Natural regeneration is going to be kind of the anchor for your entire map. Alright guys, so random tick speed is something that is not used unless you really want to accelerate the game, which I don't know why you would do this. But random tick speed, you can actually have to type in a number for it, like 20. It's naturally 0, but you can increase how quickly plants grow and how quickly trees grow and so forth. It's not favored upon in like survival maps because a lot of people want to play it how Minecraft is actually meant to be played. So we're not really going to go too much into the random tick speed with this map because it really doesn't involve a whole lot of plants, but it's something to kind of note if you guys are using, if you guys maybe are wanting to accelerate gameplay, or I could imagine like a game where if you have to grow plants quickly to get food and you're trying to survive nights or whatever. In fact, I actually have an idea for a map right now. This is how I work. And it basically would kind of work like that. So let's talk about the next game rule, which is going to be our reduced bug info. This one is kind of pointless, but let's put this as false. And let's see. Let's actually do reduced true. So you guys can see it takes away like our coordinates and so forth. I'm not sure why you would want to do this. It's also an option in the settings, I believe. I believe it's under video settings. I'm using Optifine, so I don't really know where to find that, to be honest. But you can also do that in the settings. I don't really understand why you would do that because I would like to see my coordinates, but it's something in case you want to lock players' coordinates or something like that. You can do that pretty easily with the reduced bug info. Alright guys, so the next one we're going to talk about is send command feedback. Now, this one is kind of basically like the best way to describe it. I set it to false already. If I set command block output, let's just go with this one because it's the easiest one. Command block output to true. You guys can see it's not showing anything in the chat. Set it to false. Doesn't show anything in the chat. I do want to set it to true though. If we go back to this and set that to send command feedback true, and then and you guys can see it says true and false there, something. But if we set this to true, it says game rule command block has been updated to true. So that's just something, send command feedback, just to let you know what's happening in the chat and so forth. Command block output is more for command blocks. Show command out or send command feedback is basically just whatever you do in chat. Alright guys, so the next one we're going to talk about is show death messages. This is basically when a player dies, it will show up in chat. basic way to describe it. You can set this to false if you don't want to, if you're maybe doing like a stealth UHC or something like that, or stealth Hunger Games, or you didn't want people to know when people died or if they're still alive. I imagine you'd probably be able to still kind of see that on, like, if you're on like a server where it kicks people after they die or whatever. But it's something kind of cool to add if you want to change up UHC a little bit. You can just do this and it can show the death messages. So we're going to set that to true just because I want to see death messages, but you can mess around with that if you'd like to. Alright guys, so the last two are kind of pretty self-explanatory. Spawn radius is basically the spawn chunks in Minecraft load automatically, so wherever the spawn chunks are, they load. You can kind of mess around with that. It's kind of cheating, but if you want to, I guess, load chunks, you could do it that way. Yeah, it's something that is kind of, I think if we set 20, I can set the spawn radius as well. So it's something to note. Not something that's used very often, but if you want to use it, you can. It's just the spawn chunks are constantly loaded. So you could put some pressure on your PC if you try to load your whole world. I wouldn't recommend that one, but you guys can mess around with that if you'd like to. And the last one is spectators. Spectators generate chunks. So there is a game mode in Minecraft that was recently added called Game Mode 3. Game Mode 3, which puts us into spectator mode. Basically, we can just fly around, fly through blocks and so forth, and we're actually invisible as well. Basically, what this is that it makes it so that spectators can't fly around the world and load chunks. Something to note, it's used a little bit if you're using like spectators, for example, or whatever. But you can also just, I guess, confine spectators or not use spectator mode, whichever one you prefer. But we're going to set that one. Let's see, spectator generate chunks to false. So that way spectators in this game, we go into game mode 3. If we try to load up new chunks, shouldn't allow us to. Yeah, we're about to hit a border here. So anywhere that was loaded, now you guys can see that we're not allowed to load any more chunks. Nothing's loading for us anymore. So we just have to fly back. So it kind of makes it nice if you're running like a public server with command blocks and you don't want people just flying and causing lag on the server and so forth. So it's something nice to note. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up for me today, showing you guys the game rule, talking about a little bit about the game rules. Next episode, we're going to probably talk a little bit more about the game modes, and then maybe, just maybe, we'll start working on a map here, so that way I can start to actually get something put together for you guys, and as well as you guys can see some commands in practicality. But for now, this is Cubic signing off. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.